Welcome to Twilight Fables, where the tales you thought you knew reveal their darker hearts. Tonight we tell the story of a girl who once slept in glass and awoke to love. But sometimes when one returns from death, something follows back. This is Snow White, the Mirror's Bride. The forest was still when the coffin cracked. A sound like splitting ice echoed through the glade, brittle and clean. The glass lid, long pressed against her pale lips, trembled and lifted. Snow White drew her first breath in months. The world rushed in, cold air, birdsong, the scent of moss and apples. The prince dropped the golden edge of the casket, startled by the sound of her gasp. His attendants froze. For a moment, no one dared move, as though one wrong motion might wake her back into death. Then she opened her eyes. They were not the soft blue of storybook innocence, but grey, the shade of early dawn before colour returns to the world. Her gaze met the prince's and held it. He fell to his knees beside her, speechless. The legend would later call it love at first sight, but in truth it was something closer to recognition. He had seen her in dreams, and now the dream was breathing.
"Where?"
Her voice trembled.
"Where am I?" "You are safe," he whispered. "The apple's curse is broken. You live, my lady."
Her fingers touched her lips, then the crystal edge of her coffin. She turned her hand, studying it, marvelling at the pulse beneath her skin. Slow and reluctant, as if the heart itself had to relearn the rhythm of being alive. The dwarves who had watched over her wept openly. They gathered her hair, brushed the leaves from her gown, wrapped her trembling shoulders in their small coats. But even as they embraced her, Snow White's gaze drifted to the shards of apples scattered in the grass. Red, glossy, uneaten. She remembered the taste. Sweet first, then bitter, then nothing. They took her back to the castle 2 days later, under banners of white and gold. Bells rang through the valley announcing her return, and the prince ordered a celebration that would last a week. The people lined the streets to see her pass. "The fairest of them all," they whispered, and for a moment she smiled. But when she caught her reflection in the carriage window, she faltered. The girl in the glass did not smile back. Snow turned away, pressing her hand to her chest. The glass of the coffin had been cool, comforting. This reflection was wrong. Too sharp, too knowing. The prince noticed her shiver. "You are cold," he said, offering his cloak. "It will take time to feel the world again." She nodded, but her gaze lingered on the carriage window, where her reflection's lips now curved in a small private grin. The castle stood tall above the hills, its spires glinting like blades in the sun. Snow White had lived there once, long ago, under another rule, one of fear and envy. Her stepmother's chambers were sealed now. The servants avoided that wing entirely. Still, Snow asked to see them. The prince hesitated. "There is nothing there for you, my love. Let the ghosts rest." But she insisted. Something in her heart itched at the thought of that room. The queen's scent, the whisper of silk gowns, the echo of a voice that had once said, "My dear, beauty is both blessing and burden." That night, while the prince slept, Snow White took a candle and walked barefoot through the silent corridors. The air grew colder the deeper she went. The queen's rooms were untouched, draped in dust and velvet. Cobwebs curtained the mirrors, and the scent of perfume, sweet and stale, lingered faintly. On the vanity sat a familiar shape beneath a heavy black cloth. The mirror. Snow White stood before it, her candle trembling in her hand. The cloth's edge brushed her wrist, like breath. She hesitated only a moment before pulling it free. The mirror gleamed as though it had been polished yesterday. Its frame was wrought from black iron, shaped like curling vines, each leaf glistening with dew that wasn't there. For a moment, it reflected only her. Pale face, dark hair, eyes too wide. Then, just as she turned to leave, she heard it. A whisper. "Majesty." She froze. The word was so soft, it could have been her imagination. "Who's there?" Silence. Then faintly, as though from far away, "The fairest returns." Her candle wavered. She stepped closer. "You speak?" "Always. I have spoken since the first gaze fell upon me, but none listen now." The voice was low, melodic, not quite male, not quite female. It vibrated in her bones rather than her ears. She should have fled. She should have run straight to the prince, told him of this cursed relic, demanded it be destroyed. But the voice was gentle, mournful. It reminded her of the stillness she had felt within the coffin, that deep, endless quiet where even the heart was still. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I am the truth of the eye," the mirror said. "The one who remembers what beauty costs." Her reflection blinked, once, without her doing it. The next morning, the prince found her seated by the window, watching the sunrise through frost. "You were gone," he said softly. "I walked," she replied. "I needed air." He studied her face. "You look pale." "I dreamed I was still beneath the glass," she said, smiling faintly. "And when I woke, I missed it." The prince's smile faltered, but he kissed her forehead. "You are awake now, and loved. That's all that matters." But that night, when he reached for her hand in sleep, her fingers were cold as marble. Days passed. The wedding was planned. Musicians tuned their instruments. Silks were dyed in shades of pearl and rose. Snow White smiled when spoken to, thanked her attendants, and learned to walk again in sunlight. Yet her mind wandered always to that mirror in the Queen's chamber, the way it had said her name, as though it had known her all along. She began visiting it in secret. Sometimes it was silent. Sometimes it whispered small things, fragments, like dreams. "Do you remember the glass? Do you remember the piece?" She asked it once what it had said to her stepmother. "I told her the truth," it said, "that she was the fairest, until you." "And was it true?" "It is always true, until it changes." The mirror's voice was not cruel, only sad. Snow White touched its surface. It was warm beneath her hand, as though it breathed. Her reflection smiled, her lips slow to follow. At the edge of the mirror's frame, faint scratches marred the iron. She traced them with her fingertip, realizing they were letters, carved in haste. "I see you." They weren't her handwriting. The prince began to notice her silences. "You drift away," he said one evening at dinner, "even as I speak." She blinked, realizing she hadn't touched her food. "Forgive me." Do you still dream of her? He asked carefully. The Queen? Snow shook her head. No. But later that night, she dreamt of a woman standing behind her reflection. Tall, regal, weeping. And when Snow reached for her, the woman's face split open into 1,000 shining shards. She woke with tears on her cheeks. The next morning, the servants found Snow White in the Queen's chamber again. The black cloth lay on the floor. Her hand rested against the mirror's frame, her eyes distant. When they asked if she was all right, she smiled. Perfectly. They left her alone. She began to hear the voice even outside the chamber. In corridors, in the bath, in her dreams. Sometimes it called her Majesty, sometimes my love. It told her things only she could know. The taste of the apple, the scent of her coffin, the feeling of her last breath caught beneath glass. When she whispered, "Why do you call me love?" The mirror answered, "Because you are what she wished to be, and what I will never lose again." The wedding came. Snow White walked the aisle in white silk, her hair gleaming like black water. The prince looked upon her and felt a tremor of unease. For a moment, he thought, impossibly, that her reflection in the polished floor did not match her movements. But when she smiled, he forgot all else. Her beauty was impossible, luminous, unreal. When they kissed, he tasted frost. That night, as the kingdom celebrated, Snow White slipped away from the feast. The mirror waited in the Queen's room, glowing faintly in the dark. "You are free now," she whispered. "Why do you still speak to me?" The mirror's voice shivered like wind through crystal. "Because love is never free. It binds. It reflects. It remembers." She reached out, and for the first time her hand did not meet cold glass. It sank an inch beneath the surface, rippling like water. The mirror sighed, and her reflection's lips parted, whispering her name. Snow. In the morning, the prince found her seated before her dressing glass, brushing her hair. She looked radiant. Her skin shone with an almost glassy perfection. "You were gone again," he said gently. "I couldn't sleep," she murmured. "Sometimes I think I hear her voice." "The Queen?" Snow smiled faintly. "No, mine." He laughed softly, though unease prickled at the back of his neck. Her laughter didn't follow his. It echoed a second too late. He kissed her cheek and left. The mirror behind her shimmered. Her reflection didn't stop smiling, and in the Queen's old chamber, where dust never seemed to gather, a voice murmured through the iron frame. "The fairest, once more." The days after the wedding were bright, but Snow White's world was dimming. She moved through the castle like a spirit, smiling when spoken to, attending feasts, walking among gardens she could not feel. Servants whispered that their new queen was gentle, gracious, but her eyes were strange, too calm, too still, as if they looked past the living into something only she could see. The prince noticed it most. At night, when he touched her hand, her pulse fluttered and vanished. Her skin was cool as the marble floor. She slept soundlessly, not the restless turns of dreamers, but utterly motionless. Her chest rising so faintly that he sometimes feared she had stopped breathing. Once, in the moonlight, he leaned close and whispered, "Snow, do you dream?" Her lips parted in sleep. A whisper escaped, faint, sighing. Always. The Queen's chamber was forbidden. Yet each night, when the prince's breathing deepened into slumber, Snow White rose and walked barefoot through the halls. The mirror awaited her, gleaming faintly in the dark, as if lit from within by a hidden heart. When she entered, the air changed, heavier, colder, yet somehow welcoming. "Majesty," it breathed. She smiled faintly. "You shouldn't call me that." "What else should I call you?" "You are what remains. You are what she was meant to be." She was cruel. "She was lonely," the mirror corrected softly. "As are you." Snow hesitated. "I'm not lonely." "I have the prince." The glass rippled faintly, distorting her reflection. "He loves what he sees." "But you wonder what remains when no one looks." Her throat tightened. "You make me sound vain." "No," it said gently. "Only human." She stepped closer. Her reflection did not move. The prince tried to fill her days with life, music, visitors, hunts, laughter. He adored her, but he could not ignore the quiet distance in her eyes, a shimmering veil between them. One evening, he found her in the Queen's chamber again, candlelight flickering around her. The mirror's surface was veiled, yet the air seemed charged. "Snow," he said softly. "Why come here?" "These rooms are cursed." She turned, her expression calm. "It was her mirror, not mine." "It should be destroyed." "Would you destroy your reflection?" He frowned, uneasy. "A mirror is only glass." Her gaze lingered on him. "Is it?" When he reached for her, her fingers were cold. That night, he dreamed of her standing inside the mirror, her hands pressed to the glass, eyes wide and luminous. Behind her, shadows shifted like breathing. He woke gasping, her name on his lips, and found her side of the bed empty. He went searching. In the Queen's chamber, the candle was still lit. Snow White stood before the mirror, her gown unfastened at the throat, hair falling over her shoulders. The air shimmered faintly around her. The prince stepped closer, heart pounding. "Snow?" She turned slowly. Her reflection did not follow. He froze. "Do you see it?" she asked, voice trembling. He stared at the glass. Her reflection still faced forward, smiling faintly, though she herself had turned away. What is this?" "It loves me," she whispered. "It says I am more beautiful than before. It says I am becoming what I was meant to be." "Snow, you mustn't." "It speaks kindly. It knows me." She looked at him, her eyes shining wetly. "Do you?" He reached for her shoulders. "You are not well. Please." But her reflection in the mirror smiled wider, eyes dark with adoration. And the mirror whispered, "She is perfect." From that night on, he ordered the Queen's chamber locked. The mirror was covered again, the key given only to him. Snow said nothing. She smiled as always, calm and serene, but her hands began to tremble when she brushed her hair. When she passed a window, she avoided her reflection. At meals, she barely ate. She said she was full, that her heart felt heavy, that her dreams were too bright to hunger. And when she spoke, her voice grew softer, as if she were echoing someone else's words. One morning, her maid screamed. The prince rushed to the queen's chamber and found the door open. Snow stood before the uncovered mirror, her fingers trailing its surface. Her reflection stared back, identical, until she turned to face him. The reflection did not move. He froze in the doorway. Snow dash dash. "It says I'm fading," she said dreamily. "That I'm crossing over." He stepped forward. "Step away from it." She smiled faintly. "Don't be afraid. It's beautiful there. So quiet. No time, no hunger, no decay." "You're frightening me," he said, his voice breaking. Her reflection turned its head toward him. That night, the prince sat alone in his chambers, unable to sleep. He could not shake the image, her reflection moving a heartbeat late, smiling when she didn't. He remembered the stories of the queen who had once asked the mirror who was fairest, of the madness that followed. He had dismissed them as superstition. Now he wasn't sure. Snow White's body changed. At first, subtly. Her skin grew smoother, almost translucent. The warmth of her hands faded. Her eyes, once soft grey, became glassy. Beautiful, but unfeeling. When he touched her cheek, she smiled vaguely, as if through a dream. "You are different," he whispered. "I'm becoming what the mirror sees," she said. He caught her wrist. "You speak as though it's alive." Her gaze drifted toward the queen's chamber door. "Perhaps I am the one who isn't." The servants whispered that she no longer cast a proper reflection. In sunlight, her image flickered, like light through water. At night, the prince sometimes woke to find her sitting before the mirror in their room, staring into it for hours. Once he heard her whisper, "Soon." Finally, he could bear it no longer. He called for the mirror to be destroyed. The guards carried it from the queen's chamber to the courtyard, covering it in black cloth. Snow White watched from the balcony, silent. When the hammer fell, the mirror screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was pressure. A low, vibrating moan that shook the stone beneath their feet. The glass shattered. The air went cold. The prince fell to his knees, covering his ears. When he looked up, Snow White was gone from the balcony. He ran. He found her in the queen's chamber, kneeling before the empty frame. Blood streaked her hands. The shards of the mirror lay scattered like ice, cutting her palms as she tried to piece them together. "Snow!" She didn't turn. "It's dying." He knelt beside her, taking her hands. "You're bleeding." "It needs me," she whispered. "It says I'm the only one who can save it." He pulled her back, but she twisted from his grasp, clutching a fragment to her chest. "I can hear him still," she murmured. "He's calling me. He loves me." "Who?" he demanded. Her eyes lifted to his, filled with tears and adoration. "My reflection." The prince tried to pull the shard away, but she pressed it closer, whispering, "He says you'll never understand." The fragment's surface shimmered. For a heartbeat, he saw another face within. Pale, flawless, smiling. It wasn't his Snow. He recoiled, horror rising. Snow White's voice softened. "He says I belong with him." Then she pressed the shard against her heart. The glass didn't cut. It sank through her skin as though it were water. Her body shuddered once, then stilled. The prince caught her before she fell, trembling. Her skin was cold, her eyes wide open. For a moment, he thought he saw movement beneath her skin, a flicker, like light reflected on water. And then she breathed. Her hand rose to his cheek, tender. "Don't cry," she whispered. "I'm here." He froze. Her eyes, they weren't the same. Too clear, too still. Behind her, the empty mirror frame gleamed. He turned toward it and saw her reflection smiling. But the woman in his arms wasn't. After that night, Snow White recovered miraculously. Her wounds vanished. Her colour returned, pale but luminous, like moonlight on snow. The prince told himself it was over, that the madness had passed, that she was whole again. But sometimes, when he kissed her, her lips were too cold, and when he whispered her name, she didn't always answer right away, as though listening for another voice beneath his own. In the Queen's chamber, the broken mirror had been repaired. No one could explain it. The shards were gone, the frame whole again, and within its depths, two reflections stood side by side, one faint, one radiant. When the servants entered, they swore they saw the faint one turn, lips moving silently, as if whispering through the glass. The prince didn't believe the tales. He couldn't. But at night, when his new bride slept beside him, her skin cool, her breath slow, he sometimes saw movement in the mirror across the room. A shadow. A smile. A woman pressing her hands against the inside of the glass. And when he turned to wake his wife, she only whispered, half dreaming, "Don't look. She's jealous." The palace had grown quieter in the weeks following the Queen's death. The celebrations waned, the petals rotted on the marble steps, and even the music faded to a ghost of its former joy. Snow White found herself wandering the endless corridors alone more often, her slippered feet whispering over polished stone. She should have been happy. The people adored her. Her husband, the prince whose kiss had broken death, was kind, patient, tender in every way a story would wish for. Yet when she smiled, the gesture felt rehearsed, as though she was still lying in that coffin of glass, pretending at life while the world looked on. It was not the poison that haunted her, nor the Queen's malice. It was the silence. That peculiar, tender silence of death she had known for a brief eternity. The sound of her heart stilled, her breath suspended, her thoughts untethered from the weight of flesh. In that stillness, she had seen herself perfectly, flawless, unchanging, untouched by time or pain. Alive again, she felt that perfection crumble under the friction of heartbeat and breath. And so she returned to the Queen's chamber. The door still bore the faint scorch marks of the torches that had burned outside during the Queen's final hours. No one entered there now. The servants whispered that it was cursed, that the Queen's shade lingered by the mirror, waiting for her beauty to be called upon once more. Snow White did not believe in curses, or perhaps she did, and merely longed for one to find her. She slipped inside at dusk. The chamber was cloaked in dust and shadows. The heavy drapes hung like torn wings, and the faint scent of old perfume, violet and myrrh, still clung to the air. Upon the far wall, draped in black silk, was the mirror. Snow White stood before it, her reflection hidden beneath that shroud. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from something like reverence. Slowly, she reached out and lifted the cloth. The mirror's surface shimmered faintly in the dim light. No image appeared at first, only the suggestion of endless depth, as though she gazed into a pool without bottom, Her pale face came into view after a moment, soft and ghostly, the candlelight trembling across her skin. For a heartbeat, she saw the Queen's face behind her own. Snow froze, blinking, but the image vanished. She exhaled. A trick of shadow, nothing more. And then, Snow White. The whisper was soft, barely a breath. She turned sharply, but no one stood behind her. Her hand tightened around the silk in her grasp. "Who's there?" The mirror's surface rippled like water, and in that ripple she saw her reflection smile. She had not smiled. "Do you not remember me?" the voice murmured, smooth as glass sliding against stone. "I remember you. I watched you sleep in the Queen's coffin. Such perfect stillness." Her throat constricted. You're not real." "I am as real as your reflection," the voice said. "Do you think she is real? The one who looks back at you?" Snow felt her pulse in her temples. The mirror's glow seemed to breathe faintly now, a dim silver light pulsing like a heartbeat. "Who are you?" "A friend," it said, almost tenderly. "I spoke once to your stepmother, when her heart still longed to be beautiful. But you are beauty itself. You are what she wanted to be." Snow White took a step closer, unable to look away. "You knew her?" "I knew her more than anyone. She came to me with her vanity, her hunger, her jealousy. But beneath all that, she only wanted to be seen. You understand that, don't you?" Her lips parted in a silent breath. "You have been seen by all, adored by all," the voice continued. "But none truly see you. Not as I do." The words felt like hands pressing against her heart. "I see the way your soul flickers between life and death," the mirror whispered. "I see the way your beauty mourns itself." Snow's reflection tilted her head, even though she stood perfectly still. The mirrored eyes gazed back with devotion. "You were most beautiful when you slept," the mirror said. "Perfect in your silence, unspoiled by breath or thought. But you could be so again, without the pain of dying." Snow's pulse fluttered wildly. "That's not beauty," she whispered. "That's nothingness." The mirror's voice softened. "Is love not a kind of nothingness? A surrender?" Her breath trembled. The next evening she returned, and the evening after that. Each time the voice spoke to her like a lover hidden behind glass. It told her she was the only one who ever truly understood it. That the Queen's heart had been too loud, too full of envy to hear what the mirror offered. But Snow was pure. Pure enough to listen, to love. At first, the prince noticed nothing. He only saw the faint bloom of colour that returned to her cheeks after each visit. He thought she was healing. But as days became weeks, her laughter grew softer. Her eyes no longer reflected warmth but glass. She would sit for hours before her vanity, watching herself, touching her own cheek as though testing the texture of reality. The prince found her once, late at night, standing before the Queen's mirror again. "Snow," he said softly. She startled. The silk shroud half slipped from her hand. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. He looked past her. The mirror was uncovered, but its surface was dark. "Why?" "It speaks to me." The words hung between them. He stepped forward cautiously. My love. It's just a mirror. Whatever the Queen. Don't speak of her, Snow snapped, her voice sharp, foreign, then softer. Please. He reached out, touched her shoulder. Her skin was cold. Come to bed. She didn't move, and then he saw it. Her reflection was still smiling, though she was not. He froze. His breath clouded faintly, though the air was warm. The reflection's lips moved soundlessly, its eyes glinting with something that was not light. Snow turned, following his gaze, and for the first time saw the separation herself. Her reflection looked back with love, not fear. The mirror whispered in her mind, He does not see you. He sees what you once were. But I see what you are becoming. Her heart beat faster. The next morning, her servants whispered that the Queen's chamber had been opened again. The prince forbade anyone from entering, but Snow's absence at supper that night told him where she had gone. He stormed into the room, sword in hand, candlelight flaring across the mirror's surface. Snow! She stood before the glass, her white gown trailing across the floor. Her reflection shimmered beside her, not mimicking her this time, but reaching toward her. She's waiting for me, Snow said faintly. She loves me. Who? The one inside. Snow, there's no one. Her reflection placed its hand upon the inside of the mirror. Snow mirrored it without thinking. When their palms met, the surface rippled, and for a moment, he swore he saw another world behind it. Endless silver halls, the shimmer of glass roses blooming without scent, and two figures standing hand in hand. Don't you see? She whispered. This is what beauty was meant for. To last. Forever. The mirror pulsed faintly, and her reflection leaned forward, lips meeting the glass. Snow closed her eyes. Her body swayed, faintly luminous. The prince cried out, pulling her back, breaking her hand from the mirror's touch. The reflection screamed without sound, its face contorted in heartbreak. The light dimmed. Snow fell into his arms, trembling, her skin cold as marble. Destroy it, she whispered hoarsely, before it calls me again. He nodded, lifting his sword. But when he struck, the mirror didn't shatter. It merely rippled, laughing softly. And in the reflection, two figures stood together now, one of them looking out with eyes that were not Snow's. The Queen's chamber had been locked for 3 days. The prince ordered guards at the door, forbade anyone to enter or even speak of the mirror. The servants whispered that the young Queen was ill, stricken with fever or grief or something unnameable. They did not know that each night she rose from bed barefooted, drawn as though by moonlight, to stand before that silver surface once more. The mirror had grown patient. It no longer spoke aloud. Its whispers came as thoughts that slid beneath her own, so seamlessly she could not tell where her voice ended and its began. She avoided her husband's eyes. His love felt heavy now, full of questions, of warmth she could no longer return. Each time he touched her hand, she thought of the mirror's cool surface, its perfect silence. The prince believed the worst had passed, that she was recovering from her strange illness. He slept again beside her. But in the darkness, when his breath evened into dreams, Snow White would slip from his arms and walk the halls alone. The palace seemed different at night, quieter, almost listening. The walls exhaled soft drafts that lifted her hair, and sometimes she thought she saw herself reflected in places where no mirror hung. the dark sheen of a vase, the polished marble of the floor, even the prince's eyes when he woke suddenly and caught her watching him. Her reflection lingered a moment too long before following her. The fourth night, she returned to the Queen's chamber with a candle trembling in her hand. The mirror awaited her uncovered.
"You came back," the voice murmured, not in sound, but in her chest, a vibration that shivered through her bones. "I never left," she whispered. The surface rippled faintly. Her reflection stepped forward, clear and radiant, no longer shadowed. The figure in the glass was her, and not her. The same pale skin, the same lips, the same dark hair. But there was no flicker of thought behind those eyes. Only stillness and adoration. "You're beautiful," the reflection said. Snow smiled faintly. "So are you." "But you're fading," she blinked. "What?" The reflection touched its face. "Each time you come to me, I take a little more. A little of your warmth, your colour. Soon I'll be you." Snow should have recoiled, but instead her heart quickened in wonder. "And what will I become?" The reflection smiled. "Mine." She exhaled slowly, her fingers grazing the glass. "Will it hurt?" "Only for a moment." She felt the mirror's pull like the tide. Gentle, inevitable. The candlelight flickered and dimmed, and the surface shimmered as though breathing. She leaned forward, her forehead almost touching the glass. From behind her, a door creaked open. "Snow?" The prince's voice. She flinched, turning sharply. The candle's flame wavered. He stood in the doorway, dishevelled, barefoot, his face pale in the dim light. "What are you doing?" "I'm tired," she said softly. "It helps me sleep." His gaze darted to the mirror. That thing should have been destroyed. "You tried," she reminded him, "and it didn't break." "It's poison, Snow." "It's her voice you hear." "No," she said sharply. "It's mine." He hesitated, searching her face. She looked the same, yet not. Her beauty was uncanny. Too still. Too composed. Even her tears, when they came, seemed deliberate. "Come away from it," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Do you remember the day you found me?" He frowned. "Of course." "You saw me lying in the coffin behind glass. You said I was the most beautiful thing you had ever seen." "I said you were alive," he corrected. "But I wasn't," she whispered. "I was dead. And you loved me then." He took a step toward her. "I love you now." Her voice trembled. "No. You love the memory of her. The girl who slept, unchanging, unbreathing. The mirror knows that. It showed me." He reached out, but she stepped back, her hand pressed flat to the glass. Her reflection smiled faintly. "Snow, please." "You'll understand soon," she said, "when you see me as I truly am." He lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. But the moment his skin touched hers, the mirror flared with white light. A sharp, cold wind burst through the room, scattering ashes and silk. The mirror's surface rippled violently, and the reflection pressed against it from within, her mouth open in silent longing. Snow gasped, feeling herself pulled forward by invisible hands. The prince tried to hold her, but her skin had turned slippery, almost liquid, her body light as vapour. Her reflection reached out, and for an instant he saw both of them, one pleading to be freed, the other pleading to be let in. Then the two merged. The glass went still. The prince staggered back, his chest heaving. The room was silent except for the echo of his own breath. The candle had fallen, its flame guttered out. "Snow?" he whispered. She stood before the mirror, calm, immaculate. Her gown shimmered faintly, as though woven from the reflection itself. Her skin glowed pale as porcelain. Her eyes were endless. "Snow," he said again, voice cracking. She turned toward him and smiled. It was the same smile she had worn in the coffin, perfect, serene, untouched by life. He crossed to her, trembling. Are you all right?" "I am," she said softly. Her voice was smooth, distant. "I've never been more alive." He exhaled in relief and drew her close. Her skin was cold beneath his hands, but he told himself it was shock, nothing more. He kissed her hair. In the mirror behind her, another figure watched. Snow White, pale and wide-eyed, pressing her hands against the glass. The prince didn't see. He couldn't. Her voice was soundless now, lost behind the silver. When dawn came, the servants found the prince and queen at breakfast. She looked radiant, almost luminous in the morning light. Yet something about her face made the maid drop her tray. A subtle wrongness, a perfection too absolute. The new queen's eyes were glassy and pale, and when she smiled, it was delayed, as though remembering how. The prince noticed small things at first. Her laughter was softer, her touch colder. She no longer slept. At least he never saw her do so. She spent hours before the mirror in her chambers, brushing her hair slowly, methodically. When he entered, she would turn and greet him sweetly, but her reflection would lag behind, finishing the motion a second too late. One evening he lingered unseen in the doorway, watching her. The room was dark except for the silver glow from the mirror. He saw her whispering to it, but this time, the voice that answered was hers. Both hers. Two identical tones overlapping. One from her lips, one from within the glass. "What are you?" he whispered under his breath. Her reflection turned toward him, though she had not. He stumbled back, heart pounding. The reflection smiled, and then so did she. He left the room that night and did not return until morning. When he came back, the mirror was covered again, and she was sitting by the window, humming a song he did not recognize. "Did you sleep?" he asked quietly. Her head tilted. "Why would I need to?" He said nothing. Her beauty had become unbearable. Each day it grew sharper, colder, like a blade honed past use. He couldn't touch her without feeling as though he might cut himself, yet he couldn't stop. Her gaze held him like a chain. When he kissed her, her lips were cool as glass. That night he woke to the sound of a soft, familiar voice calling his name. It came not from the bed, but from across the room. He sat up, disoriented. Snow lay beside him, motionless, her skin faintly luminous in the moonlight. The voice came again. A whisper, faint but desperate. He turned towards the covered mirror. The cloth stirred slightly, though there was no wind. "Please," the voice breathed. "Let me out." He froze. Snow? Her body beside him did not stir. Please, the voice repeated, breaking into quiet sobs. He's wearing my face. The prince rose shakily, crossing the room. His hands trembled as he reached for the cloth. Behind him he heard the rustle of fabric, movement in the bed. Don't, said another voice. Her voice. He stopped. The reflection behind the cloth whispered again, louder now, frantic. She's not me! Don't listen. The one in the bed stood, her gown whispering over the floor. Come back, she said softly. You're dreaming. Her hand touched his shoulder, cold, smooth. He turned, eyes wide, and saw her face in the half-light. Perfect. Beautiful. Lifeless. He looked back at the mirror, torn. I need to see, he said, almost to himself. Her smile didn't falter. You already are. He pulled the cloth away. The mirror gleamed. Inside it stood Snow White, pale, terrified, pounding on the glass with both hands. Help me! She cried. The queen beside him placed a hand on his chest, gently turning him toward her. Don't look at her, she whispered. She's just a reflection. But her lips touched his. For a moment he forgot. When he opened his eyes again, the mirror was still. Only one reflection remained. The prince drew back slowly, staring into her face. There was something in her eyes now. A shimmer, like light on deep water, as if behind that beauty, something vast and watching waited. He swallowed hard. Snow? Her smile deepened, soft as a sigh. Yes, she said. Always. The next morning the mirror was gone. The queen's chamber stood empty save for a faint silver mist clinging to the floor. Years later, servants claimed that when the new queen passed by a mirror, her reflection sometimes lingered after she was gone. Just a heartbeat too long, just long enough to smile. And in the depths of those mirrors, if one looked too closely, one could see another face pressed behind the glass, pale, weeping, and waiting.